And this is Ed in San Diego, and you're on Global TV Talk Show. Our very special guest today is REINER LOMB, L-O-M-B, and he's the author of Aspire, A-S-P-I-R-E. This is about 7 essential emotions for leading positive change, no matter where you are. So the book is by a businessman by the name of REINER, R-E-I-N-E-R, LOMB, L-O-M-B. Discover the 7 emotions to lead with confidence and make your vision as a leader a reality. So he'll be here in just a few minutes, and then we'll begin. Here are the 7 critical emotions, according to REINER LOMB. Empathy, the guide to caring. Compassion, the commitment to serving. Interest, the drive to understanding. Optimism, the lens for visioning. Inspiration, the energy for mobilizing people. Trust, that's the fuel for collaborating. And positivity, he says this means being resilient. Understanding and cultivating these emotions within oneself and others, he says, is essential to change your own behavior and influence behavioral change in others. So this information will be really interesting as we enter the winter months. Certainly this change in the air. So how will we as people, or as people in business, resist mental tribulations and uncertainty and people who are afraid to do things for whatever the reason. So in this book, REINER LOMB shows the readers the importance of each of the 7 emotions, best practices to develop these emotions in yourself and in others. And then he provides practical recommendations for how to do this work as a leader with people that you serve, customers, followers, direct reports, people who you need to influence as a business leader. So we'll be right back with author REINER LOMB. Okay, we're here with REINER LOMB, and he's based in Atlanta, and he's originally from Germany, and he talks about his background in Germany, growing up living near the Berlin, what was the Berlin Wall.
Yeah,
and
near the
then,
border to East Germany. Near the border to East Germany, yeah.
I've been there to Checkpoint Charlie more than once, and walked all around it. It's fascinating stuff, for sure. So let's say hi to REINER LOMB. Hi, and welcome. You are the author of Aspire. I'm going to read this. 7 essential emotions for leading positive change, no matter where you are. And let's show the book cover, REINER LOMB. Can you hold that up?
The pleasure to show it.
Aspire, yeah, moving around a little bit. Okay, good,
Yeah.
good. Okay, good. Now I'm going to ask you to dive into the book in a few minutes, but not right now. Pick out 1 or 2 chapters or pages which encapsulates exactly what you're trying to do. So your thing here, according to the PR, discover the 7 emotions to lead with confidence and make your vision as a leader a reality. What? Not for you, but for others.
Yes.
Right. So I'm going to ask you to do a deep dive on all that, but I'm scrolling down in the notes here to you can't see it, but the bold face, the 7 critical emotions. And this is relating to emotional IQ for business leaders, right?
Yes, any kind of leader.
Not anybody, but specifically is written for a business person.
That is the main audience, but I work also with community leaders, like with indigenous leaders, for example.
Oh,
So
good idea.
the
Yeah.
principles apply to leadership in general, but I have a very strong focus and experience in the business, in business leadership.
Yes, I see that you yourself have been in business for 30 years in software. You've founded companies, and and now you're coaching. You call it a boomerang coach. Now, boomerang means you're bouncing back, right?
Well, it's a metaphor for returning people to passion, igniting their passion, returning them to purpose, because a lot of people in the corporate world have lost their way or their purpose for chasing the wrong things. So
Well, it's been a
when I
rough
started
couple of years for a lot of people.
yeah, and so that has been a big, especially people in their mid-career, they try to reassess. Am I on the right, like half of my life is over, or a large part of my life is over, and what am I doing here? And so I wrote a book in 2000, or published in 2014, The Boomerang Approach. So it was focused on helping people to find their passion and purpose, and work on what they deeply care, what they really care about.
So writing a book, this is your second book. Writing a book is a big deal. It's a challenge, right? I mean, it's all up here, and you got to get it organized, and then somebody comes along, an editor, and says, what are you doing that for? And change that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, talk about your own resilience factor.
Yeah, it requires resilience, especially this the book Aspire: 7 Essential Emotions for Leading Positive Change. That was written, a large part was written during the pandemic, while I also had some personal tragedies in the family and so on. So there were like multiple factors that life throws at you, and you have to be resilient, and you have to. So I was a lot of it actually. On the positive side of all these experiences, it helped me to write at a deeper level, but still very accessible, like so that people can relate to it. And I think people can find their own examples of adversities and setbacks and so on. And
yeah, we all have them.
Right. Yeah.
So let's get into the 7 critical emotions here. So I'm going to read them, and perhaps you do a commentary, okay?
Yeah.
Empathy, which is the buzzword today. Empathy, the guide, the gate to caring. So
Yes.
what does empathy mean, And so you define it as it's a pathway towards caring about others, about caring about something, right?
Yes, this is really the foundation. We very often hear that empathy is the most important leadership competence. I would disagree that there's one specific that's the most important. It's really very situational, but caring is the foundation, really. If leaders don't care, they're not trusted. And caring organizations.
It means showing it, displaying it.
Yeah, so as a behavior that people say, oh, my manager or my leader or my colleagues or my peers or the company leadership in general, they generally care about me. But how do you care about somebody that you don't know? So you have to get to know them, and you have to empathize with them. And empathy has multiple dimensions, but what I specifically, the dimension here of feeling what another person feels. I work very often into company situations or community situations where leaders really struggle, and the community or the organization, the people struggle. And I need to empathize with them just enough to care, and not to get totally absorbed and be like paralyzed by it, but really to care. And I had my own experience about that, and that's how I learned it. And now I'm coaching and teaching people, how can you learn caring if you haven't learned it yet, right? And that is, empathy is that gateway.
Thank you, Reiner. Let's move on. So that was empathy, the gate to caring. In other words, the passage. Number 2, compassion, which is, as you call it, the commitment to serving. Now compassion means what? A drive, an energy?
Yeah, and emotions are all energies, right? It's really in all these emotions that I write about, all these 7 are an energy. But in this case, compassion, very often in the religious sense and in the philosophical sense, is more like defined as a virtue. But here I mean the emotion of feeling compassion, which means you are really compelled and committed when you care about something or somebody's needs, that you actually act on it. So empathy and caring are not enough. You need to act on it in order to serve really the needs of people. So that's what leads to servant leadership, right? So empathy includes or builds on, compassion includes and builds on empathy, but it adds the component of that you really feel compelled to act on it, and it makes you act.
So tied in with this, interest, the drive to understanding. So that ties right in with compassion and empathy, right? It's almost the same thing, but said a different way, though.
It's another dimension of so it relates to empathy very strongly, because if you put yourself into somebody's shoes to understand their needs and feel how they're feeling. But interest has in this context in which I'm providing it, has to do with many leaders that I have encountered throughout my life really don't have a deep understanding of what they are leading towards. So let's say if you want to transform the healthcare system or the educational system, or you want to transform, let's say our energy system or the financial system to make it more resilient, you have to understand it. And we very often with political leaders, right, that are very opportunistic, we complain about that a lot. But there's a few that really understand what they're talking about, but there are many, many others that they're too superficial. So what I'm saying, that the world has ever become more complex. And in order to come up with a vision of the future that overcomes the challenges we have, you have to understand what you're talking about. You have to understand the whole systemic nature of the world and how things play together in order to come up with solutions, right? So I lead a lot of innovations and so on as well. And so that's what interest needs to be cultivated in leadership.
Now you call it optimism.
That's the next one that builds on it, optimism. So once you have created that foundation as a leader, you care through empathy, you're committed to serve through compassion, and you really understand what you're talking about through interest, then you are positioned to build a vision of the future that overcomes the needs and the issues that you're understanding and that you care about. And so you cannot look into the future and see a better future which overcomes the issues we're having right now if you don't have optimism. If you're caught in an emotion of the past, such as resentment, for example, that's an emotion that keeps you energetically, your mental energy in the past, because you feel like a victim of circumstances or somebody else's action, you cannot look forward. But so that's why when I work with leaders, that I find in emotions that get them in this negative cycle, in this rumination of the past, what happened to me, that's not fair. I try to help them shift out of that into hope and optimism, and then they can become visionary leaders.
So we've talked about empathy, compassion, interest, optimism, which is the lens for seeing all of this, right? Pulling it together. But then you go to inspiration, and that creates an energy for mobilizing yourself and others.
Yes.
Inspiration. Because the book is aspire, and now aspire means reaching up or something, right?
Yes.
And inspiration, that's sort of internal building up.
Yeah, that builds the internal motivation to mobilize yourself. But also very often people ask me, like leaders and managers, they struggle with motivating others, right? And so inspiration very often comes like a new concept, right? Because the old way of carrot and stick and motivating people, you pay them more, you give them a bonus. Let's say we know that in the sales. In sales, that's often the case, or motivate them with extrinsic motivators, rewards. It's not really mobilizing them to what is possible, right? And there's a lot of research being done how emotionally engaging somebody through inspiration, for example, how much more people will be engaged, and they will be happily engaged. And
so all of this is a display of organized energy that is designed to not lie or not to deceive employees, but to better engage with them.
Yes. Yes, and I mean, so when you think about the people are not aware of their emotions in most cases, right? They act on something, but we as human being, we are in an emotional state. It's always a mixture of emotions, if we are aware of or not. Now, a manager, a leader needs especially, but everybody needs to be aware of their emotions because it drives our behavior. So the first principle of the book is basically everybody can create change. Everybody can become a leader, a change maker, having a leadership title or not, that doesn't matter. And in order to do that, needs to change and influence the behavior of people. And what influences and drives the behavior of people are one of the most powerful drivers are emotions. They are kind of the energy that drive our behaviors, which then asks, what are the emotions? What are the leadership behaviors I need in a specific leadership situation with a specific leadership challenge? And what is the emotion or the emotions that drive that behavior? So that's kind of so that's what I decoded of the over 250 emotions that we are experiencing all the time. What are the ones for a leader really to learn as an entry point and become a much more effective, transformational leader?
So we're talking about trust and displaying that you can be trusted, you as an executive, thinking about your direct reports and other employees, that you call it trust, the fuel, the energy source for collaborating, for
Yes.
allowing all this to flow then, right?
Yeah, so once you have mobilized people through it by inspiring them, you still need to coordinate effective action towards the vision and the goals that you set, and project plans and all the things. So then in order to create that effective collaboration, coordination of action, people need to collaborate. And collaboration is without trust is not possible, right? If people don't trust each other, they're not going to work together. So we have high distrust. And there's a lot of research actually that societies, when we look at the societal level, and that applies to organizations as well, that societies where trust is low compared to societies where trust is high, they do much worse in terms of economic well-being, in terms of happiness and all those things. So societies where trust is high, but also organizations where trust is high perform much better. Okay.
Being positive, being resilient. Oh, the positive attitude creates resilience.
Yeah, that's is established by long research and different sources and so on from different backgrounds, both in organizational setting as well as in a family setting. No, so when we are faced with adversities, when we are faced with a sudden setback, the pandemic is just one example, but we have many others that we can list here, where people are just they're moving and executing towards something, and suddenly one day, to the next, or 1 minute to the next, they are stopped in the track and they cannot continue. And so that's when cultivating positive emotions makes a difference. So when people fall into a negative spiral of negative emotion, negative feeling, and fuel negativity in the organization, especially for leaders, important, then the whole organization will be less resilient. But if they cultivate positive emotions, and a leader can do that, can learn that, then the whole organization, the leader himself or herself, but also the people who he or she is leading, become much more resilient.
So let's do a couple of things here in the remaining minutes we have. You've been in business a long time, so you've learned all this through trial and error, correct?
Both to trial and error, but both to research. And I have different trainings that prepared me for that. But I've been interested in what motivates, what drives people's behavior since my early part in back in Germany, when I started out in my professional career, even in school and in sports. I was like a very interested observer of human behavior, and it constantly helped me and made me interested in figuring out what drives human behavior. And back to leadership, I'm very passionate about leadership, because I think we need to lead differently in the world today because of our divisiveness and the many challenges we have. I looked at what are the, people that have not learned, we don't learn in school about, emotions and behavioral psychology and so on. And later in college or in the corporate world, that's mostly ignored. It's now coming a little bit more over the last 20 years, but it's still, people don't learn it normally. So I have been observing and practicing that in my coaching, in my leadership, and I finally said I wanted to share that with the world, because I'm using it in my coaching every day, to enable leaders to become more effective leaders, more transformational leaders, using emotions as a tool.
I'd like to get a little practical with you now, if I could, rather than all this really good words and good enunciation, and you're very clear communicating your intent. But let's talk about in the office, whether it's remote or in physical office, doesn't matter. But there's an issue, maybe a personality issue between a direct report and the manager. It's normal, right? But
yes.
Okay, so in your experience now, do you encourage a certain way that the manager or leader could talk to that direct report without getting them crazed or afraid of you, or, afraid of what to say or not to say? How would you, if I could ask you to do a little deep dive here, because what you're saying, all these words and all these theories, they're absolutely perfectly understood. And that's an excellent transition from one to the other. But let's just talk about, okay, now how are you going to do this?
Yeah, makes total sense. I'd like to give you an example that
Please.
just comes to mind when you were describing this office situation, because this is an example that goes in multiple directions. So this is a high-level manager. I call him Czech. That's not his real name. But this is repeatedly, it happens again and again. But this is a real situation that I have coached a person out of this, or into a better place, to a more powerful, become a more powerful leader. So his boss, the CEO of the company, was constantly complaining that he was not a visionary leader, but he worked 17, 18 hours a day, and even on the weekend, and put out one fire of the other. He was kind of this leaders that really cared, worked hard. The team was working hard. Everybody was working hard, made the quota. He made his numbers, so he was successful on paper, but the leader saw something more. The CEO of the company saw something more and said, well, you're not really living your full potential, constantly complaining. So he was frustrated, and then she encouraged him to find a coach, and then he found me. And one of the first meetings, I actually listened to the CEO and I listened to him. In the meeting, then follow-up meeting with him, I said, what emotional state are you in right now? What are you feeling right now after this conversation with your boss? And it was a three-way conversation. I said, I really don't know. And I said, tell me a little bit more. And he told me the story about how she has been mistreating him despite him working so hard. So I asked him, so I sometimes need to test a little bit. I said, are you in resentment? Do you feel resentment? And then I explained what resentment means. It means it's the emotion you feel when you feel like a victim of somebody mistreating you or not treating you fair. And it's an emotion that's, other than anger, that's kept inside, and it keeps you ruminating how unfair this is. And he said, yes, I think we are evaluating a little bit. This is what I'm feeling. So I explained to him, look, with this feeling, what's happening, going on with him, and it serves as a barrier for him to be a visionary leader.
And so,
exactly
if I may jump in, so we'll call it the employee and the boss. Okay, we'll just use that for now. So the employee doesn't want to look like a baby or a complainer, so he doesn't tell the boss that he's got these feelings,
just working
because he's a technical person, right?
Yes.
Just wants to do this, do that, get it done.
Which is of course
the idea. But the emotional and the personal side is now coming up to be very important in that relationship.
Exactly. It's all like, it's really what drives their behavior and the dysfunction between the two of them, right? And so an emotion can be a barrier to a desired behavior, or another emotion can be a driver of that desired behavior. Now here, to be a visionary leader, he needed to be optimistic. He needed to be able to look into the future and not be caught in the past, the unfairness that happened to him in this case. So him letting it sink in and so on, then when he really agreed and said, this is really what I'm feeling, and he understood, they said, what do I need to do now? Okay. So I had to help him to shift out of that resentment into, you cannot shift from resentment directly to optimism. This is not possible. It's just too big a gap. So he needed to shift first to another emotion that was acceptance. Okay. So it's an intermediate step. Acceptance means that this happened to me in the past. It's something that happened. I cannot change this right now. I feel mistreated, whatever, and it's not helping me. So I'm going to accept that this happened so that I can move forward. Okay. I'm not going to dwell on it longer. I'm not focusing my energy towards support. By shifting to acceptance, from acceptance, it was easier for him to move then to future-oriented emotions such as hope and optimism. And today, this is now maybe 4 or 5 years ago when this happened. The same person that at that time was leading a handful of people, was a pretty high-level manager, but had a team of senior leaders that he was managing. He leads now large organizations of thousands of people, and he does it with such a confidence because he has learned to read his emotions, the emotions of others. He has also learned to shift emotions. And he's totally, it shows up totally as a leader. He really is a visionary leader that inspires the people. And I work now with his people in another organization, and they tell me, wow, he's really an inspiring leader.
That's great to see that work. That's rewarding. I would imagine for you to see that
Yes,
technique of explaining just how you did it, just for me and the audience, to that person, and then the impact of
yes.
that happened to work. So would you mind going into the book and just finding just like that, finding a couple of pages that has a passage or a headline that totally exemplifies what we've been talking about here?
Yeah, I'm often asked what is right now the biggest challenge for leaders that I see. Obviously, the ones that I have discovered over my decades of careers and coaching and so on, I distilled in the book. So in these 7 essential emotions and leadership behaviors that are associated with that. But one of them is really what many people have a challenge with, is really to being a visionary leader.
Visionary.
Okay? And that comes really with the struggle that we have, the change. We're dealing with exponential change, right? To innovation, but also to disruptions that are happening, like a war in the Ukraine that affects the whole economy, the pandemic, and who knows what else is going to happen. But so this disruption and innovation drives exponential change, and people are constantly catching up. And when you're constantly catching up with the change that's happening, you try to predict what change is going to happen tomorrow or next week. How do I react to it? That leads to burnout. Okay. So what I'm trying to people to coach, and how I've been always trying to lead myself, is to have a vision, to have something that pulls me, that is independent from what is happening in my environment, is my North Star. Okay. And I'd like to read this. This is chapter 4 here about optimism, the lens for visioning.
Thank you.
And something Steve Jobs said many years ago: if you're working on something exciting that you really care about, you don't have to be pushed. The vision pulls you. And that is so true, because I have was part of building multi-billion-dollar businesses, and I have been part of creating a societal change, as a climate activist, and I've seen it in the peaceful revolution in East Germany, how this vision of freedom mobilized people to bring down the wall, and then the reunification and be free, basically, in terms of travel where they can, vote for whom they want to vote, and things like that. So a vision really pulls you. So I think for any leader to be a visionary leader is for me first priority, really learning how to become a visionary leader, how to inspire with that vision the people whose life you want to change, that you care about changing. That is key. That's really at the core.
So what you've done, in my view, is really excellent, and I applaud you for that. But yeah, I'm trying to put my words together here so that it's clear to the audience out here. Your background is very technical, very strong, German, from a positive point of view, get things done, accomplished, bigness, and organized. And I don't know many female leaders, and that's just me. I don't know many female leaders who have that same power, although I'm sure they exist. And perhaps you can comment on that also. So I'm really impressed with what you're talking about, sir. And I welcome you to come back on this program at another time or join a conversation. And to my point of female business leaders, doing the same kind of thing, taking the same kind of attitudes, all of that used to be relegated to a female approach to doing business, right? And so, but it's not, it's human.
Yes, it's human.
Right. And so I'm stumbling around with words here, as you could tell, but I'm trying to express an idea that I've experienced, and now hearing you talk about it as a technical guy and a strong person, and you're doing what used to be called female things in a real manly, big time way. I think it's terrific leadership that you display here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. I really appreciate it.
And
again, what you said is very important, that these are human. This just is part of our human nature, right? That we are driven by emotions, that we feel them. Like a friend of mine who works also in the emotional field, he's somebody I admire, has written books about it and so on. Dan Newby, he called it, you have to befriend your emotions, no? Become friend with your emotions. And when I come into corporate environments and coaching, and I just did leadership workshop last week, a lot of people struggle with it. But once they spend and they understand at a deeper level what change they can create, suddenly they fall in love with it. They say, wow, this is powerful. And it's not so hard to learn. Everybody can learn it, unless there's some other condition, like, there's somebody very narcissistic in terms of pathological condition and so on. But somebody normally emotionally healthy, in my experience, 99.999% of people can learn those emotion-based leadership skills. And they can become more transformational, more powerful leaders, more confident leaders, because you walk in any situation and you can read and feel the emotions of the other person. And I worked in all over the world. So this is independent from culture. I worked in Japan, in Korea, in China. I worked in South America, in many places. I had always global leadership roles. So what I'm talking about here, these feelings, what people are feeling, that we have in common as human beings. We might express it differently.
Thank you, REINER LOMB, that's L-O-M-B, author of Aspire. And why don't you hold up that book cover one more time? Yeah,
it's Aspire: 7 Essential Emotions of Leading Positive Change. And people can go to my website, reinerlomb.com, and they find the book there, but they can also go to Amazon, any Amazon domain where Amazon is, any country where Amazon is available.
Great.
And selling.
Thanks for being on Global TV Talk Show. I invite you to come back.
It was a great pleasure, Ed, to talk to you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Bye-bye. Thank you.